Hey, Matija, welcome to Beyond MD. I'm really excited to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, Matija, it's a real pleasure. Maybe before we get started, maybe you can give people a little bit of background on yourself. We're going to be talking about startups, starting a business. Talk about yourself and your experience in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Matija. I'm currently building a business that actually helps B2B SaaS companies, so startups, manage their finances. So we do everything from bookkeeping and financial reporting through to budgeting and helping with fundraising. My journey with startups started in 2014. So I graduated with a degree in finance, but for the first kind of 8 years of my career, I was working in consulting, and I really loved it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the last 3 of those 8 years were with Deloitte. So I was working kind of with a corporate strategy team, helping financial institutions, mainly financial institutions, kind of run their operations and define their strategy. At the time, I was looking to do two things. I wanted to go back to doing finance work, and I also wanted to travel internationally or live internationally, live abroad, because I'd been in Toronto for a great number of years. So as luck should have it, I was connected with a guy by the name of Michael, who was running a startup in Uganda, which was a motorcycle finance startup, and he needs someone to run his finance team.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So he took a bit of a chance on me. I took a chance on kind of making that leap, and since then I've been kind of obsessed with the startups, particularly the finance function. And so for the last decade, this is what I've been doing, is kind of helping startups build their finance teams and scale through that function. But also most recently, kind of 4 months ago, I started building a business consulting with startups and helping them get fractional support that they don't necessarily want to hire a full-time finance lead.
That is really interesting. Matija, it's really fascinating to me. You never know when things are going to change in life, when your interests are going to pivot. That's a really fascinating story about you. And I gather also from your background that you have multiple interests. I feel like I can see some musical instruments in the background too. Are those yours?
They are, yeah. I also play but that's my first kind of passion, going back to when I was 13, trying to emulate Kurt Cobain. So I started playing the guitar around then. And I've been kind of playing ever since.
That is super, super cool. So, by the way, thank you for the content that you've been putting out. I've been following you on LinkedIn now, and you're kind of one of my weekly go-tos now. I found your content to be really interesting. And also thank you for the book recommendation, 0 to 1. I finished it on the flight home yesterday from Florida. It was a great read, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, 0 to 1 is a real classic. A lot of entrepreneurs I know kind of go back to that one on an annual basis. Obviously, it was written a while ago. Peter Thiel has a very, very interesting approach to how you should build startups.
Yeah.
And you might agree with it or you might not, but the book is definitely kind of a short read. It's based on a lecture series, like all other great books, like many other great books, rather.
Yeah, these are lectures that he was giving out, right? And I think that one of the students just took really, really detailed notes, and they collaborated and kind of put this out to the world. I found that interesting too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, it's a great. I'm happy you enjoyed it.
Oh, very much so. So, Matija, let's start with kind of generating an idea for a business. Like, I've heard different trains of thought here. Actually, the first train of thought that I subscribed to was in a book called Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. And he basically said that if you're going to have true impact for the world, you need to basically marry your experience, like your expertise, with your passion and a need for the world. And then I have other people who I follow who say, you know what, forget about the passion part, not so much that. Focus on like where your skill set really lies. So considering these things, like how do you tell people to think about coming up with a sustainable idea for a business?
Yeah, it's a great question, and my answer probably changes based on kind of what I've read. And obviously, we can go back to Peter Thiel. Like, he's also a big believer that you should be working on ideas that you think are going to change the world, right? That being said, I do think kind of it's a bit of a fallacy that all entrepreneurs have this great aha moment where they're like, oh my God, I should build X business or Y business. That's kind of like after the fact. That's what we think happened with an Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or someone like Jeff Bezos. But the reality is that the majority of entrepreneurs that I've speak to, the vast majority, they build businesses because they want to build businesses, not because they have these amazing ideas, right? And so what I'm trying to say there is that the execution of an idea is much, much more important than kind of having that aha moment or waiting for that aha moment. And what having that kind of orientation lends itself to is an orientation towards action. So you might have an idea that's kind of not fully fleshed out. You kind of saw a need in a market that may or may not be there, but you invest time to kind of flushing it out, maybe in a business plan, and then you decide to go forward with it. And then things change, you iterate and everything like that. So going back to kind of your idea of this kind of Musk-inspired passion-first approach, I think that's very, very valuable, but I would kind of defer more to having an action orientation as opposed to waiting to find what your true passion and true calling in life is.
Fair enough. I think in the business space, in the entrepreneurial space, it's important for us to surround ourselves with the right people. And I suspect that as you are building out this action plan, you have to get a sense from people, hey, my idea, this is it. Is there a true need for this in the world? Like, how do you go about acquiring that data without, I guess, necessarily, sharing your idea with too many people such that somebody may take it? But how do you go and acquire that information and strike that balance? That's always something that I've kind of struggled with. Curious on your take.
Yeah, that is kind of $1 million question, isn't it? I can give some kind of high level principles. I think that surveys are a great idea, and kind of you come from a science background, you know what building a great survey, asking the right types of questions and having the right audience is very, very important. I think that the one thing I'll say on surveys is that your audience should be customers or prospective customers, right? Asking your mom whether something is a good business idea just isn't good economic. Isn't going to provide you good economic information. Talking to other entrepreneurs is also hugely valuable. In the sense that it's kind of a sense of shared suffering. They'll always give you incredible advice on what to do next. They'll always give you incredible advice on kind of how to structure your thoughts. But if you ask too many entrepreneurs about your idea, you'll get as many kind of points of feedback as individuals you speak to. Everyone's going to have a different orientation, and they'll be very forthcoming with that information. So you might get a little bit confused and not know how to start. The most powerful advice I can provide, and I think that kind of the literature is consistent on this, and when I say literature, I mean all of these books that we're talking about, is to build what's called a minimum viable product or a prototype of your product or service and get it in front of your customers as soon as possible. Ideally, they should be paying customers, because then an individual has skin in the game and they'll give you the feedback just because they're invested in seeing you succeed. But in the absence of kind of paying customers, it should be get people using the product or the service as soon as possible, for free or paid. If it's for free, you are going to need to be a little bit disciplined in asking them for feedback regularly. Then they will help you kind of figure out, what you should be doing.
Oh, follow-up question. In terms of whether you offer a product for free or whether you ask people to pay for it, for me, this is a bit of a challenging space. But in the survey that you create, do you basically ask people, like, hey, would you pay for this? Like, is that reasonable to do? How do you figure out if people are actually going to pay for what you want to bring to the world?
So in a survey, I don't know whether people would be incredibly truthful in that question. I've never structured a survey in that way to say, would you pay for this? It's more, I'm using the survey to be like, what should I do different? What should I remove? Here's the screen. What should I remove? How user-friendly is the screen, et cetera, et cetera. I think the way you ask people to pay for it is, and I'm sorry, this is very trite, but you ask people to pay for it. Right? You put a price in front of them. and you say, so when I was starting out my business, for instance, I would go into, because as I mentioned, I have a background in consulting, so I have some experience in doing this, but you go into a call where you're just kind of having a conversation. They have some interest in bookkeeping, they have some interest in financial reporting, et cetera, and you put a price in front of them. And you try to gauge the individual's reaction. Oh, that's too high. Oh, I'm not ready to pay yet. You want to get to that no or yes very, very quickly, because then you can move on to the next customer, the next opportunity. And if you have many no's, maybe that's a signal from a market that you should maybe either charge less or pivot to a different niche in what you're trying to build.
Perfect. Let's talk about who should and who should not do this. I think there are different, temperaments that will probably succeed in entrepreneurship and other temperaments that may not do so well. But in your experience, Matija, who are the people? Like, what kind of personal attributes do they have that tend to be a recipe for success? And then the flip question is, what types of personal attributes tend to be more a recipe for failure in this space?
Yeah, for sure. And when answering this question, my kind of guidance would be, don't get discouraged if you don't have all of these skills right away.
Yep.
I think kind of the most important one, and the one that you hear about all the time when it comes to entrepreneurship, is grit. I think it's difficult to put into words how difficult, lonely, hopeless entrepreneurship can be. I've seen it in many, many CEOs. I've kind of felt that pain myself as well. You need some driver internally that helps you keep going when that is really not what you should be doing. You shouldn't keep going because you're putting your family's finances at risk potentially, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that later. I don't think that it's good advice to kind of sacrifice everything just to build a business.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the first and most important thing. The second thing is an ability to sell, right? As I mentioned, the individual starting a startup is going to be the salesperson for the first 5 to 10 customers that the startup has. So, and that necessarily, you're not going to be an expert. You're not going to be an account executive on day one. You're not going to know how to close deals. But at least a willingness to have those conversations, to ask to be paid for what you're developing, and then to learn and iterate on how good you are as kind of a seller, I think is also incredibly important. Setting goals, like somebody that has a proclivity for setting goals and meeting goals, I think that's very, very important. It's particularly when you're getting started. You need kind of milestones on a daily, weekly, quarterly, annual basis that tell you whether you're going in the right direction, right? Yep. So today I want to reach out to 20 customers. I want to call 5 customers, or I want to send 6 proposals this week. Doesn't matter, whatever the case may be for you. But you need that proclivity to be very, very quantitative in nature. And the last one I'll mention is learning. Like a love for learning, because you learn so much on this journey. Just about, obviously, first and foremost about your customer and about the market, but also you gain so many invaluable skills about showing up, about poise, about confidence, etc., and you need to be inspired by that in and of itself to be successful.
Very, very interesting. That's really helpful information, Matija. Let's maybe move on to actually getting started. One of the books I read earlier this year, it was called Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal, who was a former physician turned YouTube entrepreneur. But in his book, he talked about. Have you read that too? Have you checked out that book?
No, this is a crazy coincidence. This actually showed up on my LinkedIn feed this morning.
Really?
Somebody was talking about his book and saying that it really helped her kind of overcome trepidation towards starting a YouTube channel and editing videos and everything like that. So it's just an interesting coincidence.
Oh, that is super interesting. So that was the first book I read in 2024. And in it, he kind of gave some guidelines onto how to get started and keep the momentum going. So my next question for you, Matija, is actually in getting started. And I'll tell you this, myself, and a lot of my colleagues who listen to this podcast, I know there are other people out there who have ideas, a lot of smart people. But for us, we have that security and stability in medicine. We have a healthy income. And sometimes it could be so hard to even let go of part of that and take the plunge. So with all this that I'm sharing with you, like how do we actually take the plunge? This is something that myself and others really struggle with.
Yeah, and what I do as well. I mean, I think that if you're someone like me, you have been very, very successful in following kind of the traditional path. And by that, I mean kind of education. Education is very, very... the link between the effort that you put in and the reward that you get out is very direct, right? So if you work harder, you will get better grades, you will pass the exam, etc., etc. And so I have a CFA, and I've passed all the exams I need for my CPA. So I'm obviously very, very, and I'm not I don't say that with pride. I just say that that's kind of how I've been trained. Entrepreneurship is quite different. So if you do A, then you might get B, you might get C. 3 years down the road, you might get D, or you might get nothing, right? And there's so many decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis that have this flavor. And so despite the fact that you might work super, super hard, you might not be getting the results that you want, and then you're going to need to pivot or whatever the case may be. So it is challenging to kind of adopt that mindset. In terms of getting started, I think that and again, I hate to sound very, very simple here. The most important thing is to get started. You mentioned the words taking the plunge. So define, what does taking the plunge mean? It doesn't necessarily need to mean that you leave your career tomorrow and I'm going to just work out of my basement and developing.
yeah. No, that's not what I'm talking about here at all. I guess it's just like, accepting that, if you do something, there's some level of uncertainty, but down the road, there potentially could be some really, really meaningful impact that's going to be valuable to you. Just making time for that, and maybe letting go a little bit of your day to day to allow for that. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. The first thing I would do is think long and hard about what you want to build and start building it, right? And the benefit of the world, the way that it's set up now with remote work and AI, is that you can take a relatively inexpensive approach even to building a product, right? And so you can invest some small portion of your monthly budget into trying to get this MVP off the ground, right? So define what the MVP is, start building it, and look for customers, right? I can't imagine a better way to kind of start than that.
Okay.
Other things that you might want to think about is develop a business plan. I think this is like the traditional business 101. It does not need to be complicated. I wouldn't put hours into it, but it's who's your customer, who's your ideal customer, what's your competition, how do you aim to get your product or service to your ideal customer, and what's your financial plan. And we can get more into the financial plan because kind of that is my area of expertise. But make sure that you have, if you do want to kind of take the full-time plunge and leave your existing role, make sure that you have 6 to 12 months cash in the bank, that you can meet your obligations to yourself and your family, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure that that's all defined in a financial plan. And just zeroing in on the one thing I did say is have milestones for the business. So it's like, once I get my first customer, this is going to go from a weekend thing to maybe evenings and weekends. Once I have $1,000 in monthly revenue, I'm making numbers up, then this, then that. And so all of these things, in my definition, would be taking the plunge, right? So the important thing is just to start. Again, it's that orientation towards action.
Okay, two things. You mentioned the word weekend. The other book that I have ordered to read is called The $1 Million Weekend. Have you heard of that one as well?
I've not, no.
Okay, it's so popular. It's going to take like 6 to 8 weeks to arrive because apparently everyone's wanting to read it. It's really interesting. You also mentioned a term, Matija, MVP. Is that kind of minimal viable product?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah? Okay,
so
okay, perfect.
Yeah. This term was I think coined by Eric Rios, who had we're talking about a lot of books, but he had like this seminal book about startups called The Lean Startup. And you'll really appreciate his work because he takes a very scientific approach to building a business. And what I mean by that is it's like you have a hypothesis, you develop a test, an experiment to validate that hypothesis, and then you see whether it was right or wrong. So for when building the minimal viable product, it's the least amount of effort that you need to invest in the product to get it in front of your customers and be something that they can potentially use and get feedback on. I didn't explain that well. People can Google what it means, but it's this whole idea of you have a hypothesis. The customer is going to want to do this. In my case, the customer is going to want to not do their bookkeeping, for instance. Yeah. which obviously is a market that's thriving. So there's obviously a need there, and then you kind of develop a service that you can pitch to them that they can give you feedback on.
Okay, perfect. Matija, let's get into the meat of the talk today, and that's going to be basically the finances behind starting a business. So maybe we can start off by just talking about what are some of the early numbers that any entrepreneur will have to think about when they are contemplating starting a business. One number you kind of already gave us is have a certain amount of cash in the bank to kind of keep things going for you and your family and your loved ones for 6 to 12 months. But I'll just ask you, early numbers that we need to think about.
Sure. And you hit the nail right on the head. I think that when you're a pre-revenue startup and you're kind of doing this on evenings and weekends as a bit of a side hustle, right? Or even if you've kind of quote unquote taken the plunge and left your full-time job, the most important metric, probably maybe the only one that matters, is cash. And there's 3 things that come out of cash. There's cash on hand, which is how much cash you have either devoted to the business, or if you have a business bank account, how much cash is actually in that business bank account. The second one is something called burn. And burn is a very startup-y term, but it basically means what are your cash expenses each month, right? Are you spending $2,000 on this business? Are you spending $1,000 on this business? What's included in that $1,000? So having a clear idea of what that looks like today, and also how you want to grow that. You would just put all of that generally in an Excel spreadsheet, for instance. And then the third one related to cash is runway. At how long of a time period do I have until the cash goes to zero, right? Okay. It's a very simple calculation. It's your cash on hand divided by your monthly burn. That's your runway.
Okay, perfect. Right when you said, Matija, the third thing is you had cut out, but I have faith that the system in the background was recording everything. But so we talked about cash on hand. We talked about burn, like how much are you actually putting into the business every month? And then basically, cash on hand divided by burn gives you your runway, like how long you can kind of keep the business going. Okay. And then hopefully you can kind of keep it going long enough and then you start to become profitable, right? Like that's kind of the goal, isn't it?
Okay, so there's a big debate kind of in the startup community between what are called growth at all costs businesses, venture backed. These businesses tend to be venture backed, and then bootstrapped businesses. So I do have to let your audience know that I'm a big proponent of bootstrap businesses, and that kind of puts a certain orientation towards how quickly you can grow and scale the business. So let me just explain these two worlds,
please.
A venture-backed business or a growth-at-all-costs business, they don't always have to be the same thing, but they generally are, is a business where you rely on outside financing from venture capital investors who are going to take some portion of your company. You can think about the Shark Tank, 10% for a $1 million valuation, that kind of negotiation. They're going to take some portion of your company, but they're going to give you, obviously, cash for the equity stake that they're going to get, and they're going to expect that you're going to grow very, very fast, right? Okay. So the venture model, that was kind of the predominant model for all startups up until maybe a year or two ago when the market started becoming unfavorable in terms of interest rates in particular. And now there's a shift more towards bootstrap businesses. You don't rely on outside capital. You build it the way that we've been talking about building it. You forecast how much cash you have, you forecast how much cash you need, and then you do it all kind of yourself at a very, very low operating expense number. And what that means is that you hire less people, you focus more on outsourcing than you do on building a big team. And let's be honest, it does mean growing a little bit slower than you would if you had $10 million from a VC.
Thank you for that. That's super, super helpful to get that clarification. I think based on how you describe things, Matija, I'd probably be in the bootstrap camp as well. I think that's kind of how I would envision things rolling. Yeah. No, I'm on your team. Now, these numbers that we talked about, you talked about people who are generally successful in business, they're going to be good at setting goals for themselves. So when it comes to these numbers, how often should we be inspecting them and keeping track of them?
Yeah, at least monthly. Obviously, I'm a finance person, so I look at this almost daily just because it's an easy kind of Google sheet that I've set up, and it's very, very easy for me to understand. If you want to make a meaningful increase in your burn, if you want to hire fractional support, if you want to outsource some component, if you want to bring on a new expensive SaaS, software as a service, then I suggest that you, before making the expense, that you look at that projection and make sure that you're still comfortable with what it's showing you.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Next thing is, do we run the business as a sole proprietor or do we establish a separate corporation? Maybe you can talk about these two things and the pros and cons of each approach.
Yeah, of course. Very, very common kind of business question. So first I'll explain what the two are. A sole proprietorship is a business that's inseparable from the individual. And what this means is that all of the liabilities and the benefits of the business accrue with that one individual. They're not separate from the individual. The way you would set up a sole proprietorship in Canada, you would just simply start building the business. There's nothing really you need to do. But for the purposes of tax filing, you need to register a business number with the government of Canada that you would use on your kind of CRA forms. Okay. A corporation is something entirely different. A corporation, you're creating a legal entity that is completely separate from you as an individual. So you actually have to go through a legal process. It's very, very inexpensive to set up this entity, get a certificate of incorporation, create articles of incorporation, et cetera. Yep. The benefit of having this separate legal entity is that it's separate from you. So there's two big benefits. Number one is you don't get any of the legal liabilities of the business. Although I will caution that when people are providing loans, especially at the early stage, they want what are called personal guarantees, which kind of extends the liability to you. But you can kind of negotiate that away and still maintain that separation. And the second big benefit is that you can have people join you on the equity side of the business. You can give them stake in the business, in the corporation, by selling them equity, or just by putting them on the what's called your capitalization table, your cap table, for doing work for you.
Okay, two follow-up questions. One is, a lot of my listeners are incorporated for their medical practice. Let's say one is starting a business that is somewhat tied to their practice of medicine. And like should that business, can it be run through their medical professional corporation or should it be a separate corporation? Is it possible to answer that?
That is a great question. To be honest, I'm not sure. I do think that it would present some challenge if it's tied to kind of because when you're filling out, I'm going to think about this in a very mechanical tax form way. I think from kind of a conceptual perspective, there's no barrier that says that you can only run this corporation for this one narrow purpose, right? where you get into trouble is, number one, when you're filing your taxes, you do need to declare what the primary activity of the corporation is. I think maybe there can be other rows or whatever, so it's not very clear that it has to be 1-to-1. But the real conceptual difficulty is going to be when you want to bring on additional equity investors, right? So do equity investors want to invest in a company that is a radiology practice, but also has this SaaS that you're building or whatever the case may be? Probably not. For this reason, I do think that it's kind of, for this reason, I think that it's just more straightforward and kind of conceptually easier to just set up two different corporations.
Next follow-up question I have is surrounding liability. So let's say somebody is a sole proprietor, they're running everything related to their business personally, and then they're dealing with a lawsuit. Then I imagine that in that lawsuit, potentially, whoever is suing can come after your personal assets. Whereas if you are incorporated, does that protect your personal assets? Like if the business is a totally separate corporate entity, or does it not always protect your personal assets? I want to get a sense from a liability perspective.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we weren't cut out, so I waited to...
I know, I lost you there for a second, but I think we're good now.
Okay, cool. So yes, what you said is completely correct. So think about it this way. When the business is getting sued, in a sole proprietorship, you become the named party in the lawsuit. So ABC Co. would be suing Matija in this instance, right? Because there is no separate entity from you that they can claim. So in that case, yes, you're fully liable for the outcome of that lawsuit.
Okay.
Whereas with the corporation, the named party to the lawsuit is ABC Co. is suing XYZ Co. Right? And so in that case, all that is your liability extends to what you invested in the business, right?
Gotcha.
Maybe in terms of cash, but also more importantly, all the time that you invested in the business as well can potentially would be lost if the lawsuit was really unfavorable to you.
Okay. Let's talk about tax deductions to the business. So, if you are a corporation, anything business expense related would be obviously a tax deduction to the corporation running the business. But if you are a sole proprietor doing everything personally, my understanding is that, on your T1 in your tax paperwork, you have a mention of the business that you're running. And then those business expenses essentially become a deduction from your taxable personal income. At least that's my understanding, but can you guide us on this a bit?
Yeah, that's 100%. You're 100% correct. So the way I would explain this is that you as an individual, you can generate different types of income. So the most common type of income that individuals generate is employment earnings. And so that's kind of T4 earnings that you get from a standard employer. The second type of income you can generate is property income. So if you're renting out your condo, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. The third type of income you can generate is business income. And the Income Tax Act is written in such a way that an individual can generate business income and a corporation can generate business income, right? So at a very high level, at the most base level, what's deductible for a corporation is also deductible for an individual, with kind of for sole proprietorship rather, with obviously there's nuance there. It's an Income Tax Act. It's just very complicated. But yes, so the general rule of the Income Tax Act is if it's an expense that it's incurred for generating business income, it is tax deductible. There's obviously carve-outs for things like meals and expenses, club dues. They really don't like golf club memberships. The Income Tax Act doesn't.
Good to know.
Yeah, exactly. Insurance, where the beneficiary is yourself and not the business, et cetera, et cetera. So there are certain kind of carve-outs, but in general, anything that you spend to generate business income, either as yourself or as a corporation, is tax deductible.
Perfect. I think this is really helpful for listeners to know, because if you are considering starting something, conceivably you could start it off as a person, still generate those deductions, and then as things evolve, things grow, you could incorporate eventually, right? The business entity. So In the early days, Matija, what do we need to know about budgeting, accounting, and bookkeeping? I imagine in the very early days, somebody may be doing all this themselves. Mm-hmm. And this will segue nicely into the next part, which is about kind of when to outsource. But what do we need to know about these topics in the early days?
Yeah, I think that my high level guidance is to start bookkeeping and accounting as soon as possible. As soon as you decide that this is something that you want to invest more time in doing, even if it's a side hustle, get a QuickBooks Online license or a Xero license. Either are relatively inexpensive, and this is one of the operating expenses that you would include in your budget. And just start doing like both of these tools. Invest the time to kind of learn the tools. What is an expense? What is an invoice? What is a bill? How do I generate reports? And just start doing it yourself. The other thing I would recommend is that there's other tools, and I don't know how deep you want to go into the kind of like the software that you can get. But there's other tools that help you kind of digitize your expenses. There's tools that will help you, just there's a whole suite of SaaS that's so inexpensive, but will really help you kind of keep track of where your money is going for the business. So I suggest doing that right away, and investing the time in learning how those things work. In terms of budgeting, I think have a budget. To build a budget that makes sense for you. What I mentioned previously is a perfect starting point. So you have a line item, and I'm talking very mechanical in Excel. Have a line item that's beginning cash on hand. Then have a series of rows that tracks all of your expenses. So QuickBooks Online is $30 a month. Travel is you shouldn't have any travel when you're starting a business. Meals and entertainment is $100 a month. etc., etc., and then it ends with your ending cash on hand, and then just project that forward 24 months and see how that looks like. I think that's those tools are probably what you need to get started.
Perfect. Are there any specific bookkeeping or accounting tools? Like you mentioned, there's a few that if we learn how to use those, it could have a great impact. Like, are there any tools specifically that you recommend for a business in the very early stages to maybe learn about?
Yeah, there's two that I really, really like. Number one is either QuickBooks or Xero. I actually prefer QuickBooks Online. I think that Xero has made QuickBooks Online so much better. So what I mean by that is for a long time, QuickBooks was just kind of, Intuit is the name of the company that owns QuickBooks. They were just kind of keeping the ship going. They weren't really making improvements. It was good enough, et cetera, et cetera. But now that there's so many new entrants into the market, they've really stepped up their game in terms of new features and et cetera, et cetera. So QuickBooks is great. The second tool I would recommend is a charge card. And the company that I really like is Float, Float. The reason I like it is because it's free to you. You just have to, and the way it works is you set up subscription, you set up an account, you load some money into the account, you do get a pretty good interest rate on the money that you have, and then you can get either a virtual or a physical charge card. It's effectively a debit card that you can spend money on, and the reason that it's good is because everything is perfectly traceable. So it's a good avenue through which to separate business expenses and personal expenses.
Interesting. Keep going. I don't want to interrupt.
No. I think those are the two tools. Without knowing much else about any business that you're trying to start, that I would recommend.
Okay. Well, why a charge card as opposed to like a separate credit card? I guess for the business. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
Because so it Float's an interesting business because you get a charge card, but really it's an accounting, budgeting, and expense management platform.
Okay.
So if you just go to RBC and you get a credit card, number one, this is where personal guarantees come in. So they will ask you to guarantee they will give you some level of credit. They'll give you 20 grand up to 100 grand or 200 grand, doesn't really matter. You'll get charged interest on that card, which depending on how good your fiscal prudence is, might be a lot of money. And then their back end is just not great. Like it's just very, very hard to see the expense, to tag it, to add a receipt to it, et cetera, et cetera. And kind of something like Float is a lot better for this.
That's amazing information, Matija. Thank you. Let's pivot to a company now that is evolving, growing, and we have to start making decisions. Like, when do you decide, okay, do I need to outsource accounting, bookkeeping, and other tasks versus do I hang on to it myself? Any just guidance in broad strokes there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of gets to the ethos of what a CEO kind of quote unquote should be doing, right? And I'm assuming that you would be the CEO. If you have a co-founder, they could be the CEO. But regardless, the two co-founders should be doing things that are revenue accretive to the business, right? And what I mean by that is they should be the face of the company. They should be out there selling the company. They should be out there looking for customers, talking to customers, getting the feedback, iterating, working on the strategy, etc. When you find that a lot of this non-strategic work is really eating into your time, that's when you should think about, at a minimum, fractional support. So for instance, I know a lot of entrepreneurs that would set aside some time on the weekend or some time on some evening to do accounting and bookkeeping, right? That's fine. I mean, it's a great way to save costs. But if that becomes 2 or 3 days a week, and you're kind of losing your ability to maintain all of the expenses of the business, and and you're sacrificing your ability to get customers, that's when you should really think about kind of outsourcing these capabilities.
Okay, so along with outsourcing, we're going to have to talk about hiring, and at some point we're going to need to hire as the business expands. But Matija, what I'm interested in learning about here is, are there any pitfalls to hiring and expanding too fast? I imagine there are, but I'd love to hear your take on this.
No, absolutely. I think so. The big benefit of startups is, and again, this is I have to remind people that this is kind of like putting my bootstrapped hat on, right? The big benefit that startups have to bigger businesses is their nimbleness and their speed, right? And so what you lose when you hire an additional person, what does that mean? That means that you need to invest time into training this individual. That means you need to invest time in getting them bought into your vision. Hopefully they wouldn't have applied if they weren't, but generally they're not yet. And you need to invest time in kind of managing this individual, right? And that in itself, even if we're just talking about one single individual, that in itself is going to take time away from, again, that strategic revenue accretive stuff that we mentioned. So already you can see how you've lost a little bit of that nimbleness and speed just through having one team member. Of course, the benefits far outweigh the costs, especially if you don't have the capability that you're trying to hire. Like hiring a salesperson in the early days is almost a no-brainer because they're going to keep the lights on in the business in terms of getting more customers. So please, kind of that caveat is important.
Yep.
But other things that become more difficult as you have a team of 10, a team of 20, and even a team of 100, you just can't pivot as easily. You're not really sure whether people are bought into the vision of the company. So you have to make sure that you have a good process for building culture. And I was going to say one more thing that's slipping my mind. But yeah, you lose your ability to pivot, right? You're going to need to pivot a lot, I think, because you have a hypothesis, as we mentioned, that customer A wants X, but customer A might not even be your right customer, and X might not even be what you're trying to build. So with a team of 10, you have to then go into a town hall and say, oh, we're pivoting, this isn't really working. They're going to think, oh my God, is my job at risk, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes all of those discussions more difficult, and it adds a little bit of burden onto the speed of the startup.
Matija, I'm happy you mentioned sales and advertising in that answer because that reminded me of my next question. When I was reading 0 to 1 yesterday, there was a chapter where they talked about sales, and Peter Thiel basically said, like, you could build the best product in the world, but if you have no mechanism to make the world aware about your product, your business is literally going nowhere. So when it comes to sales and advertising, is this a day one thing, or like how do you guide us on this a little bit, because I struggle to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and this is we could talk for hours just on this topic alone, and it just maybe we have differences of opinion here, right? But in my strong opinion, sales is a day zero thing.
Okay.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So advertising and marketing is a little bit more of a nuanced and complex topic. It can mean a lot of things. I love branding. I love art, and so I do want my website to be beautiful. I do want my pitch decks to be beautiful. I do want any product that I build to be beautiful. I think that's less essential than getting the product in front of the customer as soon as possible. And kind of this is a theme that we keep coming back to in the conversation. But I really do think that that's kind of crucial. And so the extent to which either you can do that, or a co-founder can do that, or you can outsource that capability. I just think somebody needs to be doing that, because as you mentioned, and as I've said before, you can have this amazing idea and you can like really, draw out this amazing product, and it might be exactly what the world needs, but unless you hit the ground running with the idea, it's just not going to go anywhere. And so your follow-up question might be, how do you do that? And I think that networking is a huge thing. I know this is a cliche answer and it's a cliche thing, but think about the people that you already know in your network, but also attend events where your customer might be. I personally like cold calling. I think that it's kind of like an icky thing, especially now that we receive cold calls from UPS, telling you that they're gonna suspend your life or whatever. But I just keeping some motion going of getting in front of customers, talking to customers. I think that's crucial in the early stages.
Okay. Maybe let's talk about exit strategies. Let's say the business isn't going as planned. We talked about some numbers, our runway. That might be one thing we consider, but I imagine there are other considerations as well. So what are things we need to know around exit strategies?
This is a very, very interesting topic. And so can you just be more specific when you mean exit strategies? You mean how do you exit the business, or when do you think about exit, etc.?
You know what, Matija? I think you cut out there, so I lost you. But I also just got a notification that my headphones are running out of power, so I'm going to take these off for a second.
No worries.
Just one sec here. Okay. I just want to make sure I can hear you okay.
Are we good?
See here. So default for speaker. Matija, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Just give me
okay,
one
perfect.
second.
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yeah. Just give me one second.
I think you were trying to clarify my question a little bit around exit strategies. Sure. I totally missed that.
No worries. Can you just disconnect from the internet for like 10 minutes, please? Sorry, I just want to make sure that my connection is great, so I'm just going to ask Chloe.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we literally have 5 minutes to go.
Oh, no, sounds good. So my question around exit strategies is, can you clarify what you mean? Are you talking about when should I exit? How should I think about exit?
Well, I guess I'm thinking more about, there are certain parameters that as a business owner, you're going to have to be aware about, like, okay, this just isn't working. Either I'm running out of money, I'm hitting my runway, or I have maybe major cognitive overload, and this is just not sustainable with the life I want to live. So kind of how do you know that this just isn't going to work? Those are kind of the things that I'm thinking about, but please feel free to shed any relevant color on this answer.
Yeah,
that you think is important.
And this is also a bit of $1 million question, because it gets to the crux of the grit and perseverance that we talked about earlier, right? There's many amazing examples of businesses that have been on death's door several times, and the entrepreneur just decided to keep going, and now they're Nike, or now they're Nvidia. like Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, it's called,
Yeah.
which is about the beginning of Nike.
Yeah, I'm reading that
Incredible.
right now. Yeah.
One of my favorites. One of my favorites.
Everybody says that. I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. It's really, really good.
Yeah. But it does give example of kind of how this business was going to fail like 3 or 4 times at least, and they just persevered. Now, you have to kind of counterbalance that against what your personal realities are and what your personal comforts are. For instance, like I'm a strong believer that you should not put your family's financial stake at risk just to kind of keep building this business.
Agreed.
So it's probably better to be younger and single while building a business than kind of in the life stage that we are at. So I think that the second thing is, you mentioned it yourself, there's a temperament that you need for entrepreneurship. If it's really not for you and you just like can't sleep at all and you're just always stressed and it's really, really degrading your quality of life, then that's something you really got to think about. And the last thing I'll say is like, what's the vision? Like, why are you doing this? Like, is it to make the world a better place? Is it to become rich? Is it because you love doing it? Like, the motivation that you have for the business will keep you going in those kind of rougher periods. But if the motivation is to get rich and that's it, I really don't think that's a strong enough basis to help you persist through when stuff gets really, really hard.
I do have to ask you this. I think we all like to think, okay, we have an idea, we can get this business going, it's going to succeed. But the truth is, there are statistics out there that for many people, for most people probably, the first couple tries just aren't going to work out. Do you have any statistics, though, just to shed some reality on this? Like, what percentage of startups succeed versus fail?
Yeah, I think that I will share the statistics, but I will caution people that the statistics in itself might discourage you from even starting, right? Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be the case. Like, it would be if somebody has a business idea and they're, very, very intellectually curious, they're very, very interested in learning more about this particular customer or market, my advice is always to just go for it.
Yeah.
Just try it, see if it's for you, see if you can shed any, and then, All right, we're back, I think.
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah. So as I said, my advice is always to just go for it and try it. This is 90% of startups will fail, though, right? And so, but again, that should not be in people's mind when thinking about starting a business. And if it is, then maybe it's not. It's really not for you, because there's going to be much more evidence.
I'm just going to give it 1 sec just for it to come back. I think it maybe froze. Or you're back.
Yeah. There's going to be much more evidence that you shouldn't be doing this than a statistic, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I want to say is that we should demystify or kind of remove the negative connotation behind failure. Failure is incredible. Failure is what you do every day when you're kind of building a business. And so the fact that your business failed just means that you've got so many lessons that you can apply to the next thing. Many, many businesses don't succeed on the first go. Many entrepreneurs don't succeed on their first business. It sometimes takes up to 5, 6, up to 10 businesses, right? So failure is just kind of a stepping stone, as cliche as that sounds. But I really do believe that just because you'll fail doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
I was going to say, let's finish on more of an upbeat note, but you turned that answer into something really upbeat and something positive. So I love it. But as we wrap up, last thing, Matija, like any closing words, closing pieces of information, advice that you want to share with the listeners?
I think that just to... I'm wondering whether it's me or whether it's your connection, but it doesn't really matter.
I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. Go for it. Start again, and then we'll wrap it up.
No worries. I think that if you are thinking about this, if you've had an idea that's been festering in your mind for a little bit and you don't really know what to do with it, or you're scared to kind of devote more time to it, my strong piece of advice is to just, again, I want to kind of circle back to this, is just do it. Just try. Because as I said, if nothing else, you'll learn so much about life and kind of what's important in life. And it'll be an incredible journey no matter how long it lasts. Even if it lasts 3 to 4 weeks, you'll still learn a lot about kind of your own personal capabilities, what your potential is. So if this is something that even you have a little bit of an inkling of doing, just to take that plunge.
I love that. And I'll just share a quick anecdote to close this off. So I was traveling a month ago with a friend of mine, and we did a kind of a dads and sons trip. And he asked me at dinner, he said, Yatan, let's say you had only 20 years left. You have all these ideas. And if you had only 20 years left, would you just kind of put the pedal to the metal and just kind of go for it and do everything you wanted to do? And I was just like, you know what? 20 years left? That's still a pretty reasonable runway to have impact. So I was like, yeah, absolutely, I would do it. And then I kind of reflected on my answer. I was like, well, if I would do it with only 20 years left, why wouldn't I do anything today? So I think I love your answer. If you have an idea and you want to make an impact, and at the very worst, if things don't work out, you will learn a lot along the way. So Matija, I thought your answer was great. I just wanted to share that as we kind of close things off. But listen, Matija, thank you so much for coming on. I have to say this, I'm not just saying this, but this was one of the most enjoyable interviews for me in recent memory, because you're shedding light on a topic that is of deep interest to me as my kind of interests are pivoting in life. And so I want to thank you for your time. And I know that there are a lot of listeners out there who are probably going to feel the same way. So really appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on. I mean, my brother is an orthopedic surgeon, so I think that when we connected, it was obviously a great fit, because doctors have a kind of a soft spot in my heart. I do need to do a shameless plug. People can find me on LinkedIn, Matija Kamikovski.
Yeah.
The website for my business is precisionfinance.ca. So
yeah.
Go there. If you don't like it, please give me feedback. Kind of the
it's all good. Well, we will have
discussed.
all your links in the show notes as well. So for people who
Awesome.
want to learn more about Matija, who I follow now on a weekly basis on LinkedIn, we'll have a link to his LinkedIn profile and also his website in the show notes and ways to contact him as well. So Matija, thanks again for your time, okay? Just have an amazing Friday and weekend, okay? Take care.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.